From the very moment this situation began, insiders knew the WNBA was playing with fire. But even they didn't expect the explosion that followed. Because what started as a quiet, behind-the-scenes attempt to put Caitlin Clark in her place has now spiraled into one of the most humiliating backfires in women's sports history. A meltdown so catastrophic that it didn't just shake a single franchise. It exposed the cracks, the jealousy, the politics, and the hidden agendas sitting at the core of the WNBA. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't competition. This was a calculated attempt to humble the most watched, most talked about, most game-changing player women's basketball has seen in years. Certain veterans thought they could check her. Certain executives thought they could silence her hype. Certain players thought they could use her as an example. And certain coaches believed she would fold under pressure. They wanted to test her. They wanted to break her confidence. They wanted to show the world that she wasn't ready. That Caitlin Clark was just a college star who couldn't survive against the pros. And the plan they cooked up? The whispers, the matchups, the welcome to the league treatment, the subtle targeting on the court, the politics behind the scenes. It was all designed to humble her. But instead of breaking Caitlin, it broke them. It broke the WNBA's image. It broke the illusion of unity. It broke the league's relationship with fans. It broke the trust between players and the public. And worst of all, it broke the silence around what's really been happening behind closed doors. Because Caitlin Clark didn't crumble. She didn't fall apart. She didn't retreat. She exposed everything. And the backlash, the fallout, the numbers, the reactions, they were so disastrous. The WNBA might never recover from this. Before this entire disaster unfolded, before the WNBA found itself drowning in backlash, before players, coaches, journalists, and even sponsors began scrambling to control the fallout, there was Caitlin Clark, a once-in-a-generation talent whose rise was supposed to be the greatest gift women's basketball had ever received. But instead of welcoming her, instead of protecting the league's biggest star, instead of embracing the momentum she brought, certain forces inside the WNBA decided they needed to humble her. To understand the magnitude of this backfire, you have to understand where Caitlin came from and why her presence ignited something deeper than basketball. Caitlin Clark wasn't just a standout college athlete. She was a cultural phenomenon, a ratings machine, a walking highlight reel. A superstar who brought more eyes to women's hoops in a single season than some leagues managed in decades. Her college games broke ESPN records that not even the NBA touched. Her name dominated social media, sports radio, podcasts, and even national news. People who never watched women's basketball before were suddenly glued to every shot she took. She didn't just win. She made people care. And right there is where the tension began. Because while millions were celebrating her brilliance, some players inside the league weren't impressed. Or worse, they felt threatened. Not by Caitlin's talent alone, but by the attention she brought. The spotlight, the cameras, the endorsements, the headlines, the suddenly overflowing arenas, the fans wearing her jersey, chanting her name, lining up hours before tip-off just to see her play. For years, veterans had been begging for visibility. For years, they fought for better salaries, better coverage, better treatment. For years, they felt ignored. And overnight, Caitlin Clark delivered everything they'd been fighting for. But instead of gratitude, some felt resentment. Why her? Why now? We've been here longer. She's not proving anything yet. She's getting special treatment. The whispers grew into quiet complaints. Those complaints hardened into attitude. The attitude became tension on the court. And behind closed doors, certain players began saying the same thing. She needs to be humbled. That word, humbled, became the quiet anthem among those who didn't like how fast she rose, how much attention she stole, and how quickly fans crowned her the face of the league. So when Caitlin entered the WNBA, She didn't walk into a warm welcome. She walked into a storm brewing quietly for months. Veterans weren't planning to challenge her. They were planning to teach her a lesson. And the league? They didn't stop it. In fact, some insiders believe they allowed it. Because deep within the WNBA, there is a long-standing culture, one that the public never fully sees. Where rookies aren't celebrated, they're tested. And Caitlin wasn't just any rookie. She was the most hyped athlete the league had ever seen, and that alone made her a target. Certain players felt she needed to earn her respect. Others felt she didn't deserve the spotlight yet. Some thought she was overhyped, and a few believed she needed to be checked physically on the court. But here's where everything went wrong. The people who wanted to humble her didn't understand Caitlin's mentality. They didn't understand her competitive fire. They didn't understand her poise under pressure. They didn't understand that this is what she thrives on. From high school gyms to March Madness arenas, Caitlin had always been the player teams targeted. They slapped her, shoved her, trash-talked her, doubled her, fouled her, and tried to break her. But every attempt only made her stronger. She wasn't new to hostility. She wasn't new to jealousy. She wasn't new to pressure. She was built for it. But the WNBA didn't know that. They thought she was soft. They thought she would crumble under the bright lights and brutal defense. And they thought she couldn't handle being thrown into the fire. What they didn't realize was that Caitlin Clark walked into the league carrying gasoline. So the moment those players tried to humble her, physically, verbally, emotionally, something unexpected happened. She didn't fold. She didn't break. She didn't shrink. She fought back. And every time she did, the cameras caught it. The fans amplified it. The highlight reels immortalized it. And suddenly, the narrative shifted from rookie under pressure to she belongs here. She's the real deal. She's the future. But this wasn't just about her rising. This was about the WNBA falling apart trying to contain her. Because the more fans saw how she was being treated, the more outraged they became. People weren't blind. They noticed the hard fouls that crossed the line. They noticed the cold shoulders, the dismissive interviews, the veteran players rolling their eyes whenever her name was mentioned. They noticed the league staying silent while their biggest star was being targeted. Commentators began to ask what fans were already shouting. Why are they trying to humble her instead of protect her? Why is the WNBA allowing this treatment? Why isn't the league supporting the player, bringing them record-breaking numbers? And then came the breaking point. An on-court, welcome to the league moment so violent, so intentional, so disrespectful that fans began saying what nobody dared to admit. This isn't basketball anymore. This is personal. The clip went viral instantly. Sports analysts replayed it 100 times, calling it unnecessary, reckless, and embarrassing for the league. Twitter exploded with millions of views. Celebrities weighed in. Even NBA players reacted. And suddenly the WNBA found itself facing the one thing it feared most: public scrutiny. Sponsors called. Networks questioned. Fans demanded answers. The league panicked. Because what was meant to humble Caitlin Clark ended up humiliating them. They tried to break her spirit. And instead, they broke their own PR machine. They tried to silence her hype. And instead, they amplified it. They tried to test her toughness and ended up exposing their own insecurities. And behind the scenes, sources say the league went into full crisis mode. Meetings, emails, urgent calls, emergency messaging. Because Caitlin wasn't just a rising star. She was the only thing keeping their numbers alive. And losing her, even emotionally, would be a disaster. But the most shocking twist? The ultimate backfire? The moment that turned this from drama into full-blown WNBA chaos? It wasn't even the incident itself. It was what came after. What players whispered. What coaches admitted privately. What analysts revealed. What fans discovered. And when you hear the first big twist in this story, you'll understand exactly why the WNBA is terrified right now. The tension had been simmering under the surface for weeks, but nobody expected the moment it finally boiled over to happen in such a public, humiliating, and irreversible way. It wasn't just a hard foul. It wasn't just trash talk. It wasn't just competitive energy. It was a statement. An intentional, calculated act meant to send Caitlin Clark a message. You don't run this league, we do. The game was nationally televised. The arena was packed. The cameras were focused. Millions were watching. This was supposed to be the night the WNBA showcased its rising talent. Instead, it became the night the world saw the cracks they'd been hiding. The play started innocently enough. Caitlin had the ball, pushing up the court with her signature confidence. Head high, eyes scanning, crowd already rising to its feet because everyone knew what was coming. The energy shifted. The noise swelled. This was her moment. But then, out of nowhere, a veteran player lunged at her. A hard shoulder, an extended arm, a forceful blow that sent Caitlin crashing to the floor. The arena fell silent for half a second. That eerie silence right before a storm breaks loose. Then, "Boo!" The crowd erupted in outrage. Fans screamed. Analysts gasped. Even commentators went silent before one finally blurted, "That was unnecessary." Caitlin stayed on the floor for a few seconds too long. Long enough for viewers at home to feel their chest tighten. Long enough for every replay to freeze on her expression. Part shock, part pain, part disbelief that someone had gone that far. And the player who hit her? She didn't apologize. She didn't help her up. She didn't even look sorry. She walked away with the same energy that caused this whole problem. I meant it. And that is when everything changed. On social media exploded within seconds. That was dirty. Why would she do that? WNB. A targeting Caitlin is obvious now. This is embarrassing for the league. Someone's got to protect her. This is too much. But the real disaster wasn't the foul. It was the reaction from other players. Some veterans were caught on camera smirking. A few rolled their eyes. One even clapped. It was the kind of moment that could only be described as professional jealousy. Filmed in 4K. And people watching at home started screenshotting everything. Every smirk, every sarcastic smile, every dismissive gesture. Those screenshots became memes. Memes became clips. Clips turned into viral accusations. They want her to fail. They're threatened by her success. This isn't sports. This is bullying. And just like that, the illusion of WNBA unity shattered. But behind the scenes, it was even uglier. Then insiders began whispering that certain players had privately discussed playing Caitlin hard before the season even started. Some had allegedly said things like, "She's not going to come in here and take our shine." They acting like she invented basketball. We got to welcome her to the real world. That welcome nearly injured her, and the fans knew it. One clip of Caitlin getting up, brushing herself off, and returning to the game went so viral that people began comparing her to Kobe. The toughness, the resilience, the fire. She didn't cry. She didn't retaliate. She didn't complain. She just got up and kept going. But the more she showed strength, the more certain players doubled down. Moments later, another veteran shoved her. Then someone else elbowed her. Then someone body-checked her on a screen. It wasn't basketball anymore. It was targeted. Fans saw it. Coaches saw it. Our sponsors saw it. The entire world saw it. And instead of humbling her, it humiliated the league. Viewership skyrocketed. But for the wrong reasons. People weren't tuning in to watch great basketball. They were tuning in to see if Caitlin Clark would survive the hostility. The league's worst nightmare had arrived. The WNBA was becoming known not for its skill, but for how it treated its brightest star. And then came the first shocking twist. The one nobody expected. Like the one that turned this from a simple rivalry into a full-blown internal crisis. A leaked audio recording surfaced online. A reporter caught a bench player, mic still live, whispering to a teammate. "They told us in the locker room to play her aggressive. Coach said don't let her get comfortable." The internet lost its mind. Wait, what? This wasn't just player jealousy? This wasn't individual targeting? This wasn't random? This was coached, instructed, planned? Fans were furious. They're sabotaging her. This is dirty. Why are they trying to break her confidence? This is the worst PR move in WNBA history. The league tried to control the damage, issuing vague statements about competitive physicality and intense matchups, but nobody bought it. Sponsors began pulling away. TV networks asked for explanations. Even NBA players publicly criticized the behavior. One star tweeted, "How you gonna hate the person who saved your league?" And that sentence became the anthem of the backlash. But the most painful part of all? Caitlin stayed silent. She didn't clap back. She didn't do interviews. She didn't post emotional messages. She kept playing. And every time she returned to the court, the arenas packed out. Not for the veterans, not for the league, but for her. The league tried to humble her, and instead made her the most supported athlete in women's sports. But then, when things were finally starting to settle, another twist hit that shook the entire sports world. A well-known sports journalist published an exposé titled, "Inside the WNBA's Rookie Problem: Why Players Are Targeting Caitlin Clark." The article revealed internal tensions players had tried to hide for years. Resentment, favoritism, pay gaps, media envy, generational divides, bitter comparisons, and cliques inside the league. But the most shocking line was this. Multiple veteran players privately expressed frustration that Caitlin Clark's fame has overshadowed the accomplishments of longtime players, creating a culture of resentment that has manifested in physical targeting on the court. Everything clicked. This wasn't about basketball. This was about ego, about insecurity, about players who wanted the spotlight but didn't know how to handle losing it. And here's the most ironic twist of all. The more they tried to outshine her, the more her star grew. The harder they fouled her, the stronger her fan base became. The more they pushed her down, the higher she climbed. What was meant to humble Caitlin Clark didn't just fail. It broke the WNBA's public image and exposed internal fractures the league had been hiding for years. But the story doesn't end here. Because the next twist, the second, even bigger twist, changes everything. This one doesn't just affect Caitlin, it affects the entire league's future, their money, their reputation, their survival. And when this truth comes out, people will understand why the WNBA tried so hard to humble her in the first place. Just when fans thought the dirty fouls, jealous comments, leaked audio, and veteran hostility were the peak of the drama, they were wrong. Because everything that had happened so far, the targeting, the resentment, the on-court attacks, was nothing compared to the truth that exploded next. It didn't come from a player. It didn't come from a coach. It didn't come from a journalist. It came from inside the WNBA's own offices. A whistleblower, someone who had been following the chaos from behind a desk, someone who had seen the emails, the memos, the meetings, finally snapped. And they leaked something so shocking, so damning, so destructive that within minutes, sports analysts were calling it the biggest scandal in WNBA history. The leak was simple. A forwarded internal memo, with one chilling sentence bolded in yellow. Maintain competitive pressure on incoming rookies to slow the shift of media attention. Slow the shift of media attention. That one sentence set the entire sports world on fire. This wasn't jealousy anymore. This wasn't individual resentment. This wasn't competitive intensity. This was a coordinated effort, approved, supported, or at the very least acknowledged by people inside the league. The WNBA didn't just fail to protect Caitlin Clark. They wanted her challenged. They wanted her humbled. They wanted her spotlight dimmed. And suddenly, everything made sense. The bizarre officiating, the lack of protection after hard fouls, the media downplaying her impact, the subtle shade from analysts, near the push to highlight other players instead, the eye-rolling from veterans, the narrative that she needed to earn respect. This wasn't organic. It was engineered. And once that memo leaked, fans connected the dots instantly. This wasn't about tough love. It was about control. Because the WNBA had a massive problem on their hands, one they didn't know how to handle. Caitlin Clark wasn't just popular. She wasn't just talented. She wasn't just marketable. She was becoming bigger than the league itself. Her jersey sales shattered records. Her ticket sales doubled arenas overnight. TV networks begged for her games specifically. Sponsors lined up with checks. Casual fans became diehard viewers because of her. The league tried to make everyone equal. But Caitlin Clark broke that system. And instead of adapting, instead of celebrating, instead of riding the momentum, the WNBA panicked. They feared she would overshadow the veterans. And they feared the public would forget the older stars. They feared a power imbalance. They feared they would lose control of the narrative. So they tried to slow her down, contain her, humble her. But what they didn't realize was that every attempt to diminish her only made her fan base more aggressive, more loyal, and more protective. You can't humble someone whose supporters worship the ground she walks on. And Caitlin Clark supporters? They mobilized like an army. Within hours, thousands of fans began demanding resignations from WNBA executives. Sports anchors covered the scandal in primetime segments. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag protect Caitlin Clark. Hashtag WNBA exposed. Hashtag let Caitlin play. Hashtag stop targeting rookies. But the next twist? That's the one that turned the scandal from a PR nightmare into an existential crisis for the league. Because once the memo leaked, more insiders came forward, one after another, like dominoes falling. A former WNBA social media staffer tweeted, "We were told not to post too much about Caitlin. They didn't want backlash from veterans." A media coordinator admitted, "There was pressure to balance coverage, even when the demand for Caitlin clips was 10 times higher." A referee's assistant wrote anonymously, "There were discussions about letting them play physical against her so she'd toughen up." Let them play physical? Against one player? A rookie? You want a superstar bringing millions in revenue? Fans went insane. Celebrities weighed in. NFL players tweeted their disbelief. Even NBA legends stepped in. One tweet from a Hall of Famer went viral. "You don't sabotage the future of your sport, you protect it." Then the next leak hit. Audio. Someone recorded a private practice conversation between two coaches discussing how Caitlin needs to adjust to the pace and how the vets need to test her early. But it was the last line that truly exposed the motive. If she dominates too soon, it'll change the whole power dynamic in this league. There it was, the real fear. Caitlin wasn't a rookie to them. She was a threat to legacy players, a threat to hierarchy, a threat to media structure, a threat to control, a threat to the old guard. And when people feel threatened, they act out, irrationally. That's why veterans treated her like an intruder. That's why the fouls were excessive. That's why the shade interviews kept coming. That's why the league stayed silent. That's why the memo existed. This was never about humbling her game. It was about humbling her influence. But the biggest, darkest twist of all came when a journalist uncovered financial documents showing the WNBA intentionally prioritized promoting certain players for years, even when their numbers, fan base, and ratings didn't compare. Those players? Many were the same ones shading Caitlin, The same ones welcoming her physically, the same ones complaining about attention shifts. And suddenly, every player involved looked guilty. This wasn't rivalry. It was ego. It was entitlement. It was fear of being replaced. And the sickest irony? While they tried to suppress Caitlyn's rise, the opposite happened. Her name trended daily. Her games broke records weekly. Her highlights dominated social media hourly. Sponsors doubled their offers. Fans lined up in droves. Her jersey became the fastest selling in league history. She wasn't humbled. She ascended. But the WNBA? They were the ones humbled, exposed, embarrassed, dragged publicly, losing fans, losing credibility, or losing trust. And yet, the biggest bombshell was still coming, because another insider leak emerged. But this time, it wasn't about the league or the veterans. It was about Caitlyn herself. A private conversation, a decision she made quietly, something she told her inner circle. And when the public hears it, it will change the entire future of the WNBA. The moment those internal memos, leaked audios, and insider confessions hit the public, the reaction wasn't normal outrage. It was a full-scale eruption. This wasn't a scandal anymore. This was a movement, a cultural firestorm, a sports uprising. Fans, analysts, celebrities, and even former athletes were piling into the conversation like the WNBA had personally betrayed them. Within minutes, Caitlyn Clark wasn't just trending. She was trending in every single country where basketball mattered. Hashtags exploded across platforms. Hashtag protect. Caitlyn Clark, hashtag stop targeting rookies. Hashtag WNBA exposed. Hashtag jealousy is loud. Hashtag let Caitlyn play, millions of tweets. Hundreds of millions of views. Thousands of reaction videos. The world was watching. The first wave of reactions came from fans, and they weren't playing around. Some were emotional, others furious. But all of them had one message. How dare you treat the woman saving your league like this? People posted side-by-side charts showing how Caitlyn's arrival had single-handedly boosted attendance, ratings, sponsorship interest, and even merchandise sales. One viral tweet said, "She made the league relevant again, and this is her thanks?" Another user wrote, "I've never watched the WNBA before Caitlyn. After this, I might stop again." That one hurt, because it was true. Millions tuned in for her. Not the league, not the veterans, not the structure. Her. But the next wave of reactions, that's when the WNBA truly started sweating. Sports media personalities, the big names, the ones with massive influence, jumped into the conversation. One ESPN analyst said live on air, "It looks like the WNBA is punishing the player who revived their league. That's not just unprofessional, it's self-destructive." A Fox anchor bluntly asked, "Is the WNBA jealous of its own star?" Clips of their commentary hit TikTok and racked up tens of millions of views in hours. Then came the NBA player reactions. And that's when things went nuclear. A major NBA superstar tweeted, "You build around her. You don't try to humble her. That's ridiculous." Another said, "This would never happen in the NBA. We protect our stars." A well-known Hall of Famer added, "Caitlyn Clark is the best thing to happen to women's basketball in decades. You don't sabotage that." Even LeBron and Curry-level names subtweeted quotes like, "Imagine hating someone for making your sport more popular." Every time a male basketball star chimed in, the backlash against the WNBA grew sharper. Fans began comparing how the NBA treats rookies versus how the WNBA targets them, and the contrast was embarrassing. The next wave came from female athletes outside basketball, Olympians, tennis stars, soccer legends, women who understood what it felt like to be undermined by their own systems. One Olympic gold medalist said, "This is exactly why people don't trust sports governing bodies. They gatekeep success instead of elevating it." A women's soccer icon wrote, "When a star rises, the whole sport wins." Why is this so hard for them to understand? But the most devastating reaction of all came from a retired WNBA legend. Someone respected, someone iconic, someone with nothing to lose. She posted, "Some of these players are acting childish. Jealousy isn't leadership. Caitlin carries herself better than most veterans." That post alone broke the internet. People started tagging current WNBA players under it. Arguments erupted across the comments. Fans screenshotted and sent it viral instantly. Meanwhile, veterans who had been throwing shade suddenly pretended they had never said anything. They posted half-hearted support messages or claimed their comments were taken out of context. The internet dragged them anyway. One user wrote, "You weren't quiet when you were laughing at her getting fouled. Stay loud now." But the real shockwave came from sponsors. Emails leaked from companies expressing concerns about league professionalism. A few paused WNBA campaigns entirely. Others requested clearer protection for Caitlin Clark during games. That's when the league panicked, because money talks. And right now, sponsors were screaming. But the WNBA twisted the knife further by releasing a vague, watered-down statement that said nothing. "We support all players equally and encourage competitive spirit." People destroyed them. Read the room. This is weak. This isn't a response. Just say you messed up. Even corporate PR experts mocked the statement publicly. And then came the reactions from inside the league. The anonymous quotes, the quiet confessions, the whispers turning into shouts. A current rookie said anonymously, "We're scared to outshine veterans. That's the truth." Another player admitted, "Caitlin's treatment is embarrassing. She doesn't deserve it. None of us would want that." A coach privately told a reporter, "The league mishandled this from day one, and they underestimated her influence." But the most chilling quote came from a front office member. "If this doesn't get fixed, the league could lose everything it gained this season." And just when things couldn't get any more chaotic, a leaked voicemail surfaced. A WNBA executive, clearly panicked, was heard saying, "Tell the players to tone it down. We can't afford another clip going viral." Tone it down? So they knew. They knew the veterans were going too far. And they knew the backlash was real. They knew they'd mishandled everything. They knew they were risking the league's future. The public went feral. This is corruption. This is mismanagement. This is jealousy culture. This is a leadership failure. And in the middle of all this chaos, while the league was collapsing, players were fighting, analysts were calling out hypocrisy, sponsors were threatening to walk, and fans were torching the brand online, Caitlin Clark stayed silent. No interviews, no statements, no tears, no defensive posts, just basketball. And that silence, that calmness, that refusal to play into the drama, it made her even more powerful. People began calling her unshakable. Kids wore shirts that said unhumbled. Fans started signing petitions demanding the WNBA protect her. She was becoming bigger than the league, bigger than the drama, bigger than the politics. And that is what terrified the WNBA most. But the final twist, the one that would break the internet, the one that shook the entire sports world to its core, wasn't from players or executives or sponsors. It came from Caitlin Clark herself. A quiet decision, a whispered conversation, a secret she kept hidden. And when the world finds out what she said privately, the entire trajectory of the WNBA could change overnight. Everything had already spiraled out of control. The veterans exposed, the jealousy undeniable. The league caught in its own lies, the sponsors applying pressure, the fans rioting online, the media tearing apart the WNBA's credibility. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared anyone for the final twist that detonated behind the scenes. Quietly, secretly, and with enough force to shift the entire future of women's basketball. Because while the world was busy dissecting leaked memos, viral fouls, and shady player behavior, Caitlin Clark was planning her own move. She wasn't angry in public. She wasn't complaining. She wasn't calling anyone out. She wasn't feeding the drama. But behind closed doors, she was done. People close to her, teammates, trainers, brand reps, noticed the shift instantly. Caitlin became quieter, more focused, more distant. She started staying after practice longer than usual. She stopped engaging in friendly conversations with certain players. She started turning down interviews she normally would have taken. But she isolated herself, not in sadness, but in calculation. Because Caitlin wasn't just thinking about the next game. She was thinking about the next chapter. And then, the bombshell. A reporter with insider ties leaked a message that spread like wildfire. Caitlin Clark has privately told people she is considering sitting out games if the league doesn't address player safety. The world stopped. Sit out? Caitlin Clark? The Caitlin Clark? Fans panicked. The WNBA panicked. Inveterans panicked. Sponsors panicked. Media outlets scrambled to confirm the rumor. Because losing Caitlin, even for one game, would cause millions in lost revenue, tank ratings, and destroy every fragile thread holding the league together right now. But the real shock wasn't the rumor. It was the reason behind it. According to insiders, Caitlin told her inner circle, "I'm not letting them injure me to prove a point. If they want me to be quiet, I'll be quiet on my terms." Her silence wasn't weakness. It was a warning. But then came the next twist. Far bigger, far scarier. Another insider leak revealed a conversation between Caitlin and her agent. "If this continues, we may need to think outside the WNBA." That single sentence broke the internet. Think outside the WNBA? What does that even mean? Overseas ball? A media deal? A private league offer? Returning to college for NIL deals? On training year off like NBA stars sometimes do? Nobody knew. But her agent's alleged response hit even harder. "You have more leverage than any player in league history. They need you more than you need them." And that was the truth the WNBA never wanted the world to hear. Caitlin Clark holds the keys to the entire league's survival. If she leaves, if she steps back, if she refuses interviews, if she delays playing, if she withdraws her star power, the WNBA collapses back into irrelevance. Sponsors don't want the league. They want her. Networks don't want the league. They want her. Fans don't show up for the league. They show up for her. This wasn't just a sports story anymore. This was a power struggle. Caitlin Clark versus a system that tried to humble her. A system that underestimated her. A system that believed she needed them, when in reality, they needed her. And that's when the final twist detonated. A third leak, anonymous, untraceable. I posted on Twitter at 2:17 a.m., showed a blurry photo of Caitlin sitting at dinner with two extremely powerful men. Executives, network executives, TV executives. The caption sent the world into chaos. ESPN reps met with Caitlin Clark privately tonight. WNBA was not invited. This was not normal. This was not standard. This was not something the league could ignore. Why were network executives meeting with her alone? What did they discuss? What did they plan? Was she being offered something bigger than the WNBA could ever provide? Was she negotiating her future independently? Was she positioning herself as a standalone brand, separate from the league entirely? Much fans went into meltdown. She's done with the WNBA. This is her Warner Bros. Moment. The league humiliated her, and now she's out. This is a power move. They tried to humble her, and now she's outgrowing them. Veteran players began panicking privately, some even reaching out to her with sudden friendliness. The hypocrisy was unreal. Athletes who mocked her weeks ago suddenly wanted to talk things out. The league, now in full desperation mode, unreleased another statement, this time with a softer tone. We value Caitlin Clark and remain committed to her success. But it was too late. Caitlin wasn't responding. She wasn't reassuring anyone. She wasn't calming fans. She was silent, which was louder than any press release the league could ever write. And the cliffhanger? The same insider who leaked the memo claimed Caitlin is preparing for something massive, something career-defining, something unprecedented, like something that could rewrite the entire structure of women's basketball. They said, if the WNBA doesn't fix this immediately, Caitlin already has a plan B. And trust me, the league does not want her to activate it. Fans are now asking the same question. What is Plan B? Is she joining another league? Is she signing an exclusive media deal? Is she negotiating a new player empowerment model? Is she threatening to sit out until policies change? Nobody knows. But one thing is clear. The move that was meant to humble Caitlin Clark has now positioned her as the most powerful figure in women's sports. The WNBA didn't humble her. They unleashed her. And what happens next? It could break the entire league. If you're still here right now, if you watch this entire saga unfold from the jealousy to the fouls to the leaks to the absolute disaster behind the scenes, then you already know this story isn't sports drama anymore. This is history happening in real time. This is a power shift so massive that the WNBA might never recover if they make one more mistake. And the craziest part? We still don't know what Caitlin Clark's next move is. That's why I need you in the comments right now. Do you think Caitlin Clark should sit out games to protect herself? Do you think the WNBA owes her a public apology? Do you think certain veteran players tried to sabotage her on purpose? Do you think this was jealousy, corruption, or both? And the biggest question of all, what do you think Caitlin's mysterious Plan B actually is? Is she about to negotiate her own broadcast deal? Start a new player empowerment era? Force the league to change policies? Create her own brand outside the WNBA? Or is she preparing to drop a statement that will shatter everything? Drop your theories below. Go wild. The comments section better look like a war room, because the entire world is guessing right now. And listen, if you thought this episode was crazy, if you thought the foul was bad, if you thought the leaked memo was insane, if you thought the executive meeting was shocking, just wait until the next update hits. Because insiders are already whispering that another bombshell, something even bigger than the memo, is coming soon. And when it drops, it won't just expose players. It won't just expose executives. It won't just expose the WNBA. It might expose the entire sports media machine. So before you go, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications, because the next chapter in this story could break at any second. And trust me, you do not want to be late when Caitlin Clark makes her next move. This story is not over. It's only getting louder, only getting deeper, only getting more dangerous. Stay tuned, because the next twist, it will change everything.